there is as much difference between acrylic and other mediums as there is between the burrow and jet-propelled motors. These are the words of David Alfaro Siqueiros, one of the most famous of the Mexican muralists of the 20th century and an early proponent of acrylic paints. Siqueiros goes on to say, "The acrylic medium produced and perfected is a great contribution to 20th century art. For all my work, no other medium could possibly give me the ease of manipulation." My name is Jeff Olson, and I've been painting with acrylics for more than 40 years. In this video, I'd like to share with you some of the history, composition, and working properties of acrylic paint. I will be demonstrating the unique features of those acrylics that we refer to as the specialty colors, the metallics and pearlescents, and how to create a dynamic palette by mixing them with the traditional acrylic primary colors. Before we begin the demo, let's take a look at the origins of this relatively new medium, including the first artists to embrace them, as well as some of the unique qualities and features for their use as an artist material. The word acrylic was coined in 1843 for a chemical derivative of acrylin, an oil derived from glycerol. Otto Röhm invented the acrylic polymer, and it was patented in the 1930s in Germany by Röhm and Haas. The original acrylic paints were spirit-based, meaning they required white spirits or turpentine as a solvent, being somewhat different from modern acrylic paint as it is composed of pigments ground in an acrylic resin brought into emulsion using solvents. The first water-based artist acrylics were developed in Mexico City and in New York City in the 1950s. This water-based technology required less preparation to use, was easier to clean up, had less odor, released fewer polluting fumes, and performed better than paints formulated with solvents. One of the first group of artists who embraced these new acrylics were the Mexican muralists, including Diego Rivera, Jose Orozco, and David Siqueiros. It took until the 1960s for the new water mixable paint to take off with artists in the U.S. Color field painters like Helen Frankenthaler and Morris Lewis, and pop artists like James Rosenquist used acrylics for their staining properties and their surface quality. Acrylic paint has few technological limitations. The paint adheres to any ground, provided they are grease-free and somewhat absorbent. The adhesion between the various layers of acrylic paint is excellent, whereby the paint can be thinned alternately with water, pure, or mixed with a medium. The wonderful adhesive strength of the paint is due to the binder, a dispersion of microscopic acrylic resin particles in water. Therefore, in addition to traditional painting techniques, the paint is also ideally suited to mixed media techniques. Numerous materials such as sand, stone, sawdust, wood, textiles, paper, etc. can be mixed with the paint. Thanks to the binder, acrylic paint is also ideal for murals, even on newly constructed surfaces. Fresh cement and stucco contain aggressive alkaline elements against which a pure acrylic resin is resistant. Once dry, acrylic paint is waterproof and moisture controlling. Acrylic working properties include a very short drying time, dry to the touch in minutes, and completely dry within 24 to 72 hours, depending upon the thickness of the paint. Film flexibility is incredibly high, with wonderful versatility in regard to the number of surfaces it can be applied to. Acrylic paints will experience some degree of mass shift, meaning the marks will level or shrink after drying. This can be mitigated through the use of mediums. Most acrylic paint colors will experience some degree of color shift, meaning they will darken as they dry. This is the result of the binder being milky white while fluid, having a tinting effect on the color, then drying clear, revealing the true hue and value of the pigment. No harmful or hazardous solvents are needed for acrylics, water being the primary solvent and used along with soap for cleaning purposes. Acrylics have a very strong adhesive quality, making them excellent for mixed media and collage techniques. The variety of mediums, ranging from fluid to highly viscous, are also made from a pure acrylate. The mediums do not contain any pigment. When wet, the mediums are milky white, and once dry, they become colorless and transparent. They can be mixed directly with the paint, or alone as a very strong adhesive. The mediums are waterproof once dry. Mixing mediums with acrylic paint will influence the working properties. Varnishes for acrylic paints generally consist of resin dissolved in a solvent. They protect the paint layer against atmospheric contamination and determine the gloss of the work. A good varnish must be removable. The reason being, in the case of restoration, it will always be possible to remove it with a solvent without damaging the paint layer, including after many years. I'm always fascinated by the story of artist materials in general. Learning their history and understanding their composition not only enhance your experience and deepen your appreciation for them, but connect you with the artists of the past in a more intimate way, as if you're in the studio painting alongside them. In today's demonstration, we'll be focusing on the acrylic specialty pigments, the pearls and metallics.
So what are specialty pigments? Specialty pigments differ from traditional pigments in the way they absorb, reflect, and refract light waves. These pigments include those that we refer to as being metallic and pearlescent, both of which utilize the unique features of an inorganic or mineral-based pigment we call mica. Mica is a term that has been used by the modern paint industry as a generic name for a group of micas. In mineralogy, micas are a category of silicates. Numerous silicate minerals are recognized, but the most often used is muscovite, which is ground or milled into different pigment grades. When they are pure, they are colorless or white, but due to the presence of impurities, they may be brown, blue, green, or reddish in appearance. These impurities include metals such as titanium dioxide, chromium, iron, and copper. These metals form a surface layer that covers the mica platelets that we then perceive as variations in color. Mica can also be mixed with other pigments and dyes, and oxidation can be synthetically enhanced to create more reflective and refractive visual effects. Most pigments are one-dimensional, also referred to as absorption pigments, meaning that when light waves meet the surface of the pigment, they are absorbed, and what is reflected back is what we perceive as color, in this case the color blue. Reflective mica pigments are referred to as two-dimensional. They reflect light back like a mirror. All the light waves, rather than being absorbed, are reflected, and as a result they are very luminous and appear to rise from the surface, creating a two-dimensional effect depending upon the direction of the light source. What makes a mica three-dimensional is the result of varying layers of oxidation created in the lab, a synthetic version of what happens in nature, as found in a pearl. When light strikes an oxidized mica, it is refracted. Just as in a prism, the wavelengths of light are split apart. These pearl pigments will change color based on the angle from which you are viewing them or with a changing light source.
Let's get started by looking at how we can mix them with traditional acrylic primary colors, yellow, magenta, and cyan, to create a dynamic palette of sophisticated colors that increases luminosity and can add another visual dimension to your painting.
The colors we'll be working with include pearl yellow, pearl red, pearl blue, and also the primary colors yellow, magenta, and cyan. A couple things to note on the label. Artist quality paints will not only include the name and number of the paint, but also the opacity and the light fast quality. In this example, a small square indicates whether a pigment is transparent, semi-transparent, semi-opaque, or opaque. The degree of light fastness is indicated by a plus sign, 3 plus signs being excellent, at least 100 years light fast under museum light conditions. 2 plus signs is good, 25 to 100 years light fast. 1 plus sign is fair, 10 to 25 years light fast. And a small 0 or no symbol equals 0 to 10 years light fast, or what we consider to be fugitive. The pearl colors are all transparent with an excellent light fast rating. Working on a black sheet of watercolor paper, approximately 12 by 16 inches, I'm going to place a small dab of each of the primary colors on the left-hand side. Across the top of the paper, from left to right, I'll add a dab of each of the pearl colors I'll be working with today, yellow, red, and blue. Now using a palette knife, let's create a paint swatch for each one of the colors. First looking at the mass tone, then scraping away a small portion of the paint to reveal the undertone. In the pearl colors, the mass tone is almost white. In the undertone, the true character of the pigment is revealed. Working on the black watercolor paper reveals the color profile more clearly. Now let's mix some colors. First, we'll lay out a grid of the primary colors, left to right, top to bottom. Now we're going to add the pearl colors,
top to bottom, left to right, in approximately equal amounts. This doesn't have to be perfect, just enough so that we can get a good, equal mixture. It's like squeezing out little pearls of paint onto the surface. Now the fun part. Let's mix some colors. Once you have the colors mixed thoroughly, go ahead and scrape away a little to reveal the undertone. I love the subtle tinting that comes from mixing the pearls with these primaries, not overpowering like using white. In the undertones, you can really see how the pearl colors are affecting the hue. It's clear how the pearl colors tint the primaries, increasing the luminosity and subtly altering the hue. Now that we're done mixing, let's take a look at the results. Where we've added the pearl yellow with the primary colors, we see a slight tinting, a brighter yellow, a warmer red, and I love those green undertones in the blue. Where we've added the pearl red, we see an increasing of the warmth of each color. I love those orange undertones in the yellow. The red becomes very bright and intense, and I love the shift in the blue, almost cobalt-like. The pearl blue cools down the yellow and gives us that wonderful bluish undertone, a rich red-violet when mixed with the red, and in the blue we see this deep ultramarine. Now let's pull some of these colors together and create some secondary hues. In these secondary colors, we can see even more clearly how the pearl pigments affect both the hue and luminosity of each color. Now let's do a similar exercise using the metallics, the deep gold, copper, and pewter. Unlike the pearl colors, which are all completely transparent, the metallics are semi-opaque, but have the same excellent light-fast rating. We'll begin as before by laying out our primary colors. Now across the top, the metallics, pewter, deep gold, and copper. Once again, using our palette knife, we'll create a color swatch for each color, scraping away to reveal the undertone. I just love how these metallics dance on the black surface.
You can really appreciate the opacity and tinting strength of these metallics in their undertones. To prepare for mixing, let's go ahead and lay out our grid again, starting with the primaries, left to right, top to bottom. Now let's add the metallics, top to bottom, left to right, in equal amounts. It doesn't have to be exact, just enough so that we can get an even mixture. You can see right away how the opacity of the metallics have a more dramatic effect on both the value and the hue of the color. In this 1-to-1 ratio, we're maintaining the character of the metallic, but it's much more subtle and sophisticated. Now let's take a look at the results. Let's begin with the yellows. The pewter really cools the yellow down, creates this wonderful greenish yellow effect. The gold is beautiful with the yellow, this very rich, glowing ochre. And finally, the copper mixed with the yellow creates this wonderful bronze with warm undertones. Now let's look at the reds. The pewter tints the primary red and creates a wonderful potter's pink. The deep gold creates a vibrant orange with warm undertones. Finally, the copper mixed with the primary red gives us this deep, rich vermilion. Now the blues. I love how the pewter creates this steely ice blue. The deep gold mixed with the blue creates a wonderful turquoise, and I love those gold undertones. And finally, the copper with the blue. What a wonderful earthy violet.
Now that we've seen how these colors can be mixed and manipulated, let's explore how to integrate them directly into an original composition.
Along with my acrylic paint, I'll also be using materials that include a 12-inch by 12-inch gesso board. Any surface that you want to use will be fine. I also have a stencil that's 12 inches by 12 inches. You again can use any stencil that you like. I have 3 brushes, a filbert, a bright, and a stencil brush, and also my palette knife. Finally, I'll be mixing my colors on a paper palette pad, and off to the side I have a bucket of water and some paper towels and a paint rag. Let's begin by putting a little black paint directly on the surface we're going to be using. Using my filbert, I'm going to brush out the black to cover a little more than half of the surface of the board. The goal is to leave enough white so that we can see how the specialty pigments react on both a light and dark ground. Now I'm going to squeeze out a little of the pearl blue onto my palette. Now to place the stencil, I'm going to put mine a little off center. You can put yours wherever you like. In the immortal words of Robert Henry, the object isn't to make art, it's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. I really do love these pearl colors. It's like having little pearls on your palette. I'm not going to paint over the entire stencil, just enough so I can get a good look at the effect on both the dark and light ground. Over the black, you can see that wonderful pearl blue glaze almost immediately. In the white areas, it's only when it's tilted to the light that you capture a glimpse of it. Now replacing the stencil in a slightly different position, let's go ahead and try just some of the primary blue.
Once again, I'm not going to paint over the entire stencil with the primary blue, just enough so that I can see how it appears over both a light and dark ground. What you notice immediately is the effect is the opposite of with the pearl blue. We see the primary blue more clearly on the white ground and less intensely on the black ground. Now let's mix the two together. Now let's brush this mixture into a few select locations over the stencil, so we can compare it to the two previous layers of paint. The result is the primary blue mixed with the pearl is more visible on the darker ground. And the pearl mixed with the primary blue is more visible on the white ground, creating a vibrant veil of color. The reason we see the colors differently on the dark and light ground have to do with the way that black and white reflect and absorb light waves differently. Black absorbs all of the light waves, therefore only the pigment on the surface is reflecting light. White, on the other hand, is reflecting back all of the light waves, enhancing the blue and washing out the pearl color. Now let's brush in some of the primary magenta. As before, we're just going to fill in small areas of color over both the light and the dark ground. Feel free to go beyond the edges of the stencil, brushing directly onto the surface. Once again, just like we saw with the primary blue, we see with the magenta better color over the white ground than we do over the black ground. Let's keep moving the stencil around for our next layer of paint. Next, we'll use one of the metallics, the deep gold. Even on the palette, the gold is a powerful color. As you begin to apply the gold onto the surface, you can see the covering strength of this semi-opaque color. The result is a bold color on both the light and dark ground. As I tilt the surface of the painting both toward and away from the light, the color lifts, almost as if it were coming off the surface, creating a two-dimensional effect. Now let's mix the gold and the magenta together. Just like before in our color mixing studies, we get a very vibrant and rich color. While you're applying the paint to the surface, you can see right away how the gold intensifies the magenta, making it lift off the surface of the painting. While the gold and magenta mix pop off the surface of the painting, the magenta on its own becomes almost invisible as it dries. Now let's experiment with some different ratios of the primary with the metallic. In the middle, a 1:1 ratio. At the bottom, a 2:1 ratio of the primary. And at the top, a 2:1 ratio of the metallic. At the top where the metallic is dominant, we get a toned down version of the copper. Where we have equal parts of metallic and primary color, we get that wonderful earthy violet. Where the primary is dominant, we get a more opaque blue with those wonderful copper undertones. Now let's see how they all play out on the surface of the painting. I'm going to create a gradation of these three colors from top to bottom. Can't help myself, I gotta throw a little up top here. At first glance, the differences are subtle, but as I tip the panel back and forth toward the light, the nuances and the sophistication of the color comes out. Now time for some free play, where we can really start having some fun. I'm going to brush in some of this pewter to clean up some of the areas and give myself a lighter ground to paint over more color. I don't have a preconceived plan here. This process is all about discovery, acting and reacting, finding that creative space to play. I just love how these metallics pop off the surface. The result is a truly dynamic light effect. Now I'm going to mix some black into that pewter and create a color very similar to graphite. I want a cleaner edge this time, so I'm going to use a stencil brush. If you haven't used one of these before, it has a flat end that allows you to tap or pat the color down directly on the surface of the stencil. Holding the brush perpendicular, you get really sharp edges this way. Quick tip here, don't overload your brush with paint or tap too hard on the surface. Wow, I really like the contrast, especially up at the top of the painting. All these layers of color are really starting to pay off now. I love the depth that's being created here. Now we're going to get bold. Let's mix the metallic and the pearl together. Bold color deserves a bold paint application. I'm going to trowel the paint into the stencil using my palette knife. Now the color is literally three-dimensional, creating a wonderful surface texture. Now I'm applying some of the copper directly to the surface of the painting. You really get some great opacity and covering power with these metallics. Now for a fun optional technique, I'm going to use a wet sponge and wipe or wash out the paint I've just applied. You have to do this while the paint is still wet on the surface.
Take as little or as much paint off as you like. The result is a type of ghost image, almost like a monoprint. For a final touch, I'm going to mix gold and blue together for a splash of color. I'm going to apply the color with my palette knife again. I just love these textures. The addition of the gold into the blue literally lifts the color off the surface of the painting. I hope this exercise has given you a deeper appreciation and understanding of specialty pigments and how they can be mixed with traditional pigments to create stunning effects. More importantly, I hope that it's a catalyst for your own explorations in acrylic paint. Here are some more examples of what you can achieve using these acrylic colors and techniques.
I hope you enjoyed this demonstration and learning more about the working properties of acrylics and acrylic specialty pigments. Their versatility and ease of use have made them one of the most popular artist materials in the world today. They truly are the paint of our time.